I don't know about all that, but thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Bethan. I'm a member of the Ambition Prints team, which is one of the enterprises, that's the better word, enterprises of Autistic Minds. So we do like all sorts of designs that get printed onto like mugs, T-shirts, badges, and anything and everything really. But you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to Mr. Patrick Samuel, who is talking about neurodiverse challenges in publishing music and fashion.
First time doing this with glasses. Okay. Hi. My name is Patrick Samuel. I'm a neurodiverse creative from London. I'm diagnosed with autism, ADHD, marked anxiety, low mood, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and I have synesthesia. You might remember me from previous years here at the conference or somewhere else where I've spoken about my path to diagnosis and how I've used daily art therapy as a coping mechanism. But this time, I'd like to tell you about some of the other things I've been pursuing. Most of the images you'll see in this presentation are taken from my illustrated book, The Sound of Purple, which I'm presenting here today for the very first time. The story of my early life might be a familiar one to those who live with autism, or those who care for someone with autism. I was a very quiet kid, unless I got to talk about my special interests, like music, Christmas decorations, and favorite colors or shapes. I struggled with being around others, didn't make friends, or understand how to play games like everyone else, and would often climb the gates of my kindergarten to run back home. When something troubled me, I didn't know how to control my emotions. There'd be kicking, screaming, thrashing, and biting occasionally. Yet, my mom intuitively knew how to calm me down, and she always kept me close. We lived in Trinidad, where I was born, an Indian family in a very close-knit town where no one knew about autism. But she would see how drawing, painting, and listening to music helped me, and she nurtured my creative side. After I got kicked out of kindergarten, she homeschooled me for a while. My synesthesia presented itself very early on. I have a lot of early memories, holding my baby bottle, being changed, touching my mom's hair and earrings when she held me. But I also remember laying down and not being able to sleep because sounds outside my room were making bright sparks and bursts of light in my head. On days when it was too bright outside, noise would fill my ears like an orchestra of static. I thought it was the same for everyone, but no one knew what I meant when I said the light was too loud. Due to circumstances beyond our control, I was separated from my parents when I came to the UK as an 8-year-old, and that protective and nurturing environment was lost. I was moved around a lot, and from school to school, making it difficult for my autism to be picked up. I eventually left home as a teenager, and for a very long time, I was lost. I made it all the way to Germany, and one Sunday morning, 21 years ago, a kind stranger bought the very hungry me a sandwich. And last year, we finally got married. I have him to thank, not only for the meal that day, but also for the many ways he's continued to save me over the years, particularly when he introduced daily art therapy to help me start speaking again after a series of traumatic events in 2016 and 17. By drawing and painting every day, I began sharing what the world feels like to me, because that's what he said. Draw what you feel. From then on, things opened up for me. In a 3-year period, I held over a dozen solo exhibitions, and my story was picked up by local media and national media, including the BBC. My synesthesia, specifically my chromesthesia, sound to color and color to sound, led me to not just create art, but also music. And within that time, I was also signed by a Neurodiverse music label that has since released 3 of my albums. A lot of those things happened, not just because of the support of my husband, but also my community. Being more visible because of my art and music enabled people to reach out to me, asking about the coping mechanisms and calming strategies that I'd been using. This led to me speaking and giving presentations at schools, conferences, and events around the UK, as well as online. I was able to demonstrate the positive effects of art therapy by delivering a series of colour therapy workshops in London as well. Despite the success as a neurodiverse creative, in a short span of time, I began to feel somewhat reluctant to keep doing it. I was producing a lot of artworks that I didn't really connect with anymore. People wanted cherry blossoms, blue skies, and personalized portraits. These motifs were present in my art therapy, and I still paint colorful sounds when I'm low, but I felt like I was moving away from my autistic self for the sake of being published, which ultimately negated the positive effects of art therapy. Though my songs were all about autism, in my music videos, I began to worry if I was good-looking enough and wore the right clothes. And just as I was grappling with all of that, something happened. The pandemic might have brought the world to a standstill, but having all of my exhibitions, performances, talks, and appointments grounded, I found a new kind of freedom. As a kid, there was no one around I could connect with because my interests were so different. I liked different clothes, music, art, movies, and comic books. As a 10-year-old, give me heavy bass lines and electric guitars, and I was happy because my synesthesia meant that visually, this gave me the best experience. I was so awkward to be around others that when my mom would only dress me in my shirt and ties and faux snakeskin trousers, that's when I felt comfortable. My dad saw how I struggled with staying focused whilst reading and would get me horror comics whilst the other kids my age were reading Narnia and The Hobbit. But I kind of lost that sense of self, and for a long time I was able to rediscover it again during the pandemic and lockdowns. This fueled my art in a new way, reshaped my music, and set me on the path to embrace the real me. I could no longer paint pretty pictures just because I knew they'd sell, nor make music that everyone else would say was nice. And I didn't care anymore whether or not I needed to look a certain way. I was born on Friday the 13th, after all. I was meant to be different and not wildly accepted, something I was finally able to accept. As we came out of lockdown, I felt there were a lot of things that had been missing over the years. Due to sensory overload and difficulties using public transport, going anywhere would need a huge amount of planning, though I was already a Freedom Pass holder. When I was finally awarded enough PIP points, we could sign up to the mobility scheme. My husband had already been my full-time carer for many years, so it was not difficult to have him as a named driver for the small but handy electric vehicle that we were given. This small car changed my life a lot. I was now able to get to so many of the places and events I longed to experience, such as Comic-Con, Whitby Goth Festival, Stonehenge, seeing my favorite bands like Sisters of Mercy, Susie Sue, Gary Newman, and The Mission. After a 20-year absence, returning to goth nightclubs where I promised myself I would make friends. And you know what? I did make friends with people who share my passion for the same kind of music, fashion, movies, and literature. It was this year, however, I decided I wanted to change how I go forward with music. As a solo artist, I felt I wasn't getting where I wanted to be. So I formed Visual Symphonia, a neurodiverse band with my husband as bass player. As a band and label, new doors began to open for us. With our brand of dark rock and our name as a nod to my synesthesia, and in an industry where we've seen too many performers stand still on stage and hide themselves in mist and fog, we knew that Visual Symphonia had something unique to offer. We knew it would also be a huge challenge because neurodiverse bands don't really fit any of the boxes the music industry has, and as such, we're probably somewhat of a risky project. Our first official show as a band was just this summer at Cart and Horses in East London, a venue famed for being the birthplace of Iron Maiden. With a full team that were aware of my autism, every effort was made to ensure that everything went smoothly. It was the first time performing outside of my local community and in front of a crowd that we didn't know. Amidst the lights, lasers, and rising fog, I never felt as electric as I did on stage that night with my bass player as we played after midnight for an hour straight. As I started to become more of the person I always wanted to be, I was discarding a lot of things too. I stopped wearing anything I didn't feel expressed who I was. So out with the Primark clothes that cluttered my wardrobe for years. My husband taught me how to use a sewing machine, and I began to sew many of our new clothes. From basic templates I drew up, I came up with my own patterns and came out with colorful creations I'd wear for special events, music videos, and performances, and like today. The sensory experience of sewing my own clothes gave me a new coping mechanism, and we're working on ideas for fashion design, even if it's just a niche. It almost feels like neurodiverse creations need their very own marketing strategies. Maybe some of you might remember my pal Kevin from last year. Kevin is a sponge-based life form who's joined me on stage on many occasions and has released his own Christmas album. Like me, Kevin is also autistic and unfiltered. It was a great experience last year here in Cardiff where kids connected with Kevin, talked to him, and laughed with him. And since then, we've met a few autistic children, and seeing them pop up and open up with Kevin gave me the idea to create some neurodiverse buddies for him. So let me introduce you to Cotton Candy Cuddlebug, Midnight Fangsworth, Barney Fuzzstrom, and Shadow Chuckles, who each come with their own backstories. Yeah. I brought them here with me today, so come and see me, and maybe you might want to adopt one or two of them. With Visual Symphonia, it was my hope that our very first album would be released by the independent record label I was signed to. But the powers that be, especially the economy, were not on our side. So we began to tout the album to various other, more mainstream labels, but quickly found out that our music did not fit into any one defined category. With 15 tracks on the album, each with its own unique sound and story to tell, Fire and Rain refused to be defined, and we refused to compromise on our vision. With Hawken on bass and myself playing up to 27 instruments, as well as vocals, we decided we were not willing to give up control on single choices, artwork, or any other aspect of our music or visuals. So we thought it fitting to launch the release of the album here today, in a neurodiverse kind of way, of course. Defiant, determined, and uncompromising. I found out the hard way that the only way I could be myself was in my work. Thankfully, there are small businesses that even in times like these are willing to support up-and-coming artists who have to cope with additional challenges. So I want to thank Direct CDs in Hertfordshire for lending us a helping hand in printing a limited edition digipack, and Fairview Duplication in Yorkshire for sponsoring a special edition on cassette later this year. This way, we were also able to utilize my passion for art, and for the first time, I used digital tools which, on one hand, lack the sensory experience of paints and brushes, but allow a different kind of freedom, as there's no anxiety over smudges or wayward strokes. So I got to work on something that combined Gothic imagery with space and the cosmos, covering both of our special interests. Something that tells a story and represents the music, rather than the fickle taste of the audience record labels usually have in mind. I've been advocating for autism awareness for a number of years now, and an exhibiting artist for just as long. One of the things people have always suggested was that I should publish my story and experiences of autism with my artwork. This year, I woke up with the intention of doing just that, and so The Sound of Purple was born. It tells my story in pictures, right from the cradle up to this year, and is aimed at those who want to learn firsthand what living with autism and synesthesia is like for one person, because no two stories are the same. My other intention with The Sound of Purple was to create a book for children and their parents, families, and anyone who might struggle with longer, text-heavy books. It tells a person's story, and it could be a starting point for discussions to find out how autism and neurodiversity affect and impact us all. I used as few words as possible to make it accessible, trusting that the pictures take you on a journey with me as I arrive where I am today because of the support of many others. Suffice to say, this is probably not a mass-market book, so actually having it printed was another challenge. Getting a book like this ready for print alone is a complex and costly undertaking, so printing it on top of that would have been prohibitive for me. It's with all my heart I'm able to thank Book Printing UK and Laura Keneally for not only reading my proposal, but accepting one of my original paintings in return for getting these printed. It's allowed me to add the words author and illustrator to my list of skills acquired this year, and my hope is that it resonates not only with the neurodiverse community, but also with anyone who appreciates the first-hand perspective when it comes to approaching the subject of autism. I've even managed to include a 3D image of my emotional support dog, Chase, so this might be the first autism book that includes 3D glasses. Over the years, I've learned that finding sponsors is probably the only way of getting my work out there and offsetting the cost of being creative. Art materials and subscriptions for digital tools, for example, are a necessity for any artist, but can be a real challenge for a neurodiverse creative, who often have special requirements due to sensory issues and learning difficulties. I'm lucky to have found partners who chip in when it comes to the final step of making these things a physical reality. Moo, for example, the well-known printing company, were kind enough to sponsor the special edition cards for our album, Fire and Rain. Moo's CEO, Richard Morose, did not hesitate to give us this sponsorship when I told him we'd be releasing them here today. With each year that starts, my husband and I go through my list of things I'd like to achieve. He helps me whittle them down to the ones that sound realistic. A lot of them would be impossible if I didn't have this ability to just ask for things directly. I can draw up proposals, crowdfunding plans, sponsorship ideas with ease and send them out. Most people you'll never hear from. A tiny portion will just say flat out no. And sometimes, just sometimes, there's that one person who will change your life by saying yes. I don't just have dreams. I have plans. And I thank my autism for gifting me with that shameless, can-do, don't give up attitude. And those who know me well and who gave toasts at our wedding and said, where there's a Patrick, there's a plan. Like that day, I woke up and said, I'm going to fly a plane. Testament to how the Motability Scheme has changed people's lives, I was able to apply for a scholarship this year with Airability, a UK charity that offers people with disabilities the opportunity to learn how to fly airplanes. I was chosen this year to take to the skies and have this experience of handling the plane. I highly recommend it to anyone as it's such a confidence-building exercise and something you'll never forget. Nor will my husband, who was in the passenger seat when I banked really hard and sent him sideways. There's still so much I want to do. Next year, releasing my own comic book, finalizing the computer game I designed, playing a festival, taking a dance class, and I'd love to tour an exhibition with my artwork from the book. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those who said yes, and also those who said no, and made me try harder each time. I'd like to thank them all again, as well as my parents, my family, my husband, and all of you here today. You have been amazing. And remember, don't just have dreams, make a plan. Thank you. If you've got questions, comments, or anything you'd like to say, come find me in the support zone, because you literally can't miss me. Thank you.